People have legitimate concerns about the data mining, the data tracking, and if that becomes what this is all about, we lose the usefulness. Chief Neslet and his officers, their jobs are tough enough as it is. Mm-hmm. We need to make it easier for them to prevent and solve crimes. And if we take away an important tool because our rollout was illegal and our rollout was dishonest, and the public outcry, which is very legitimate, says stop it because you weren't honest, and if you're not going to be honest, we're going to decide we shouldn't have it. That's not good for public safety. So we've got to get our hands back around this problem, be honest about how we got here, and start taking transparent steps to address the concerns while we preserve the legitimate law enforcement uses.
You met with some of our city officials or city office workers here. You're in San Diego. What did they say? What was your conversation like with those in the council?
We had a lot of good conversations. I think council members are definitely receptive. I was particularly thrilled to meet with the chief and his command staff and to realize like the distance between maybe two different positions really isn't that far. Mm-hmm. That I think this Streetlights has given a good opening to a larger discussion. If it's appropriate to write guidelines for this particular piece of equipment, why not do it for all your equipment? Which also sort of addresses what you just were asking about is, we might have data collected for one purpose that we're all okay with, but then if it's going out the back door to a private vendor, it could be used for a different purpose that we don't approve of. And so if we're never vetting these things during the procurement process, it could really blow up in our face. And so I was really encouraged. They were on board with annual reports to demonstrate how they're using their equipment. They were doing an impact analysis already. They were writing, nice policies. So I don't think the two sides are too far apart.
Okay, thank you. We'll continue the conversation in just a moment. Still ahead here on San Diego People. We're going to be joined by two local technology artists right now. These smart street lights that we have here in San Diego. How do they work?
The smart street lights, it's funny that we call them smart street lights. The lighting portion of them is only a very small part of what they do. Mm-hmm. Now they collect a lot of environmental data, the temperature of that's in the outside, the barometric pressure, mm-hmm. all sorts of environmental data like that. In addition to that, they have cameras on them and microphones, and that's really what we're talking about at this point. Right now, we're recording 24 hours a day video surveillance of the surrounding areas of these streetlights, and we're doing that in this year. It's about 4,000 of these devices that are deployed throughout the city, and by the end of 2020, the city intends to up that to at least 8,000.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
And these are we're talking about sophisticated technology.
That's right.
That continues to evolve.
That's right.
Yeah. Dr. Irani, I want to ask you about, you have actually taken your expertise to the city. You've met with some of our city council offices. What are your thoughts on what we're currently seeing today as a society here in San Diego?
Yeah, I really sympathize with the people who are working in city council trying to manage the city's infrastructures. The smart street lamp system, if we just take that as one example, is incredibly complex. The infrastructure is run by a company called Current by GE. Seth was actually just telling me that where the data is actually stored and where people can get access to it is run by Intel. So you have these complicated relationships between companies that are sharing data, and it's hard to understand as artificial intelligence evolves, as our capacities to process large amounts of data evolve. It's hard for anybody to understand what these technologies we're installing are actually going to be capable of. So I think what could really help City Council that they don't have access to right now are experts who understand computer security, IT auditing, people who are from communities who have a history of being surveilled so that they can bring their experiences of how complicated government agencies combine with the fabric of cultural life to create marginalization and side effects that we actually don't want to see as a city. So we need to have city council have access to people who can help them interpret these systems and have that debate in
Perhaps
public.
some sort of a commission.
Perhaps some sort of commission.
Yeah.
A carefully crafted commission where we make sure that the people on the commission don't have conflicts of interest, where they're supposed to make money off of the adoption of technologies, and also one that where we make sure we have all those forms of expertise I just described, rather than just the people who happen to be interested, so they can be effective.
You know, with these streetlights, these smart streetlights, Seth, coming back to you. So this information, right, is recorded on this massive database.
Sure.
And it's owned by, what is it called, the GE, that company?
Current by GE.
Current by GE. So what is Current by GE doing, or what does Current by GE have the ability to do?
Current by GE takes the data that's collected at each individual node, right? That's the street light, and they take that data up into the cloud, and they run algorithms on it to generate data based off of what kind of images that they're getting. Let me give you an example. If a car drives north on Front Street downtown, and a truck drives south on Front Street in the same place, Current by GE would be able to tell you that had happened, not because they do that on the device itself, but because they suck up that data into the cloud and run their algorithms on it and produce that kind of information that says a truck drove south at 30 miles an hour and a car drove north.
So who has access to that information? Who would want, how do you gain access to that information that's floating up in this cloud?
Sure. The city has opened up the ability to see those kinds of data points to any developer, software developer who requests access to that data from the city. They're very much hoping that we can find use cases for this that are a boon to the city, either financially via startups or some other mechanism. But otherwise, they also want the citizens to feel like they have access to that data. We do not have access to the video data, however. That is a police-only source of data, and we cannot access the video data, and the police will not provide access to it.
Does this concern you as a technologist when you take a step back from your role of really learning and being the professional who understands how this all works as an individual?
It concerns me on behalf of San Diegans that the city goes forth and deploys this technology with seemingly very little control or even knowledge about what they're doing. They sign these contracts and they deploy all this technology very, very quickly. And when we turn around to start asking questions about what they're doing, there's very few answers. And when I start meeting with people in the community, they have tons of questions, right? Why? Why are you doing this? Am I being recorded? Is it near my house? Is it watching me coming and going? And these are all great questions, but there's nowhere for them to get answers to those questions because the city did not set anything up to accommodate the citizens in this project.
Yeah, going back to you, Dr. Irani, where do you think we should go with this as a San Diego society? I mean, what would you tell our continue to tell our city leaders? Let's start there.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've been learning from talking to people who are in city council and from the conversations that the wider coalition has been having with police department, different agencies that are responsible, is that we can have a process where we don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time we're adopting one of these high-stakes technologies. I'm a professor in the design lab. I've designed technologies. I used to work at Google designing technologies that everyone pretty much uses at this point. And there's a process, there's a set of questions that we know are important to ask about who can access this data, what are the possible harms, how are we going to mitigate the harms, how do we get to the design of a technology that does the thing that we do want while having taken stock of the harms. And so what we're trying to do with the ordinance and what has happened in Oakland and a bunch of other cities in the Bay Area is that they've had success with this ordinance process of having the city kind of almost go through like a workbook process of making sure they're asking the right questions, talking to the right people, and it should make their jobs easier and it should make the technology better for everybody.
Dr. Irani, thank you so much for your expertise. Seth Hall, great to meet you. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
And if San Diego Council decides to implement, I want to start with you, Brian. If San Diego decides to implement some sort of privacy commission, something similar, what would that mean in general for the surveillance program?
Yeah, so we have a vetting framework. We have 7 ordinances in the Bay Area. We have 13 outside of California that we all typically follow an ACLU model. And of course, it's tailored for every city or county that we're in. But it's really a transparency and a procurement ordinance that requires that you have a public conversation up front before you implement something. And so I think that would have, addressed some of these concerns that we're hearing with the smart streetlights. It's, should they be positioned in front of a cancer doctor's office or in front of a mosque, or what are they actually collecting? Like, we would have asked those types of questions up front. And so by requiring that conversation to occur in public, the community members can weigh in, law enforcement will weigh in, experts will weigh in, and you'll be able to, hopefully find a middle ground. You craft a policy around that, and then you go forward. And with the Privacy Commission, they're involved as subject matter experts. They can provide feedback to both directions, to both the public and the staff that are proposing to use it, and try to mitigate any concerns. Any tool can be used for good or for bad. So ideally, we're going to mitigate or even eliminate any of the negatives that might come from such equipment, and we'll still get the public safety utility out of it.
Are you seeing an impact in your city as it relates to law enforcement jobs, employment?
If you mean, has there been an administrative burden cost?
What's the cost? What's the cost to have a commission?
Yeah, so, we're a volunteer commission. There's staff time because the city comes, staffers come to us, the police, work with us, and other departments as well. It's not just the police. Those are salaried employees. I haven't seen a budget increase for additional staffing. We've got about 4 years under our belt now, and nobody's asked for modifications to the reporting requirements. None of the jurisdictions in the Bay Area have had to seek additional funding to comply. So it's been a very practical, elegant solution to a complicated conversation, and it works. That we're still getting that utility without costing $1 million to try to get there.
Corey Briggs, you're running for city attorney. You think this is the way we should be going in?
Yeah, I think that you should be transparent in all things that you do at the government. You should be open with the public up front, open with the decision makers. We weren't. We have an opportunity to fix it. And then you need to have a process that ensures transparency and ensures that the public is involved. But the ordinance is going to require some work from the city's lawyers.
You're already getting petitions in
Yeah, we have 3,000 San Diegans have already signed a petition wanting us to go in this direction because of the conflict that we talked about in the last segment. The city has an additional thing it needs to do, and that is it needs to get an outside lawyer who's an expert on this, who isn't making money off of Current by GE or any other GE companies, whose interests are nothing but making sure that privacy rights are protected for San Diegans. Get in fresh blood. This isn't a political pitch. This needs to be done now, long before there's a campaign or long before there's an election. But the city can't do what Oakland's done unless it has a legal advisor whose goal, first and foremost, is protecting public safety and protecting San Diegans without regard to her portfolio.
All right, we'll leave it there. Corey Briggs, thank you for coming in. Brian Hofer, thank you so much for taking some time to explain what the city of Oakland is now doing as it addresses these concerns that continue to evolve and that we're very much faced with here in San Diego.
Those who see through the lies are quickly gagged and bound. Ambition realized. Tear the whole fucking thing down! I was right behind you.